And we're live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicinda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope and desire is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, help amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but my most favorite way is sitting down with those designers to just talk to them about their design, what they work on, and their process. Today we're sitting down for the second time actually with Jason Cordova, but we're going to be talking a little bit more specifically this time. Lots of times we'll talk about how people got into RPGs, how they got into design, and you can go back and watch my first conversation with Jason to find all those things. Today we're going to talk specifically a little bit more about design, specifically the design that goes into Brindlewood Bay and some of the other projects that come out of Gauntlet. If you're not familiar with Brindlewood Bay, it's live on Kickstarter right now, but rather than have me tell you about it, Jason, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and tell us a little bit about Brindlewood Bay.
Yeah, thanks. So I am Jason Cordova. I am the founder of the Gauntlet gaming community, and I also host a podcast on that on the Gauntlet network called Fear of a Black Dragon about old school RPG modules. And I'm involved in our publishing efforts, and we have a game that is on Kickstarter right now, Brindlewood Bay. Brindlewood Bay is a game about a group of elderly women who are members of the local Murder Mavens Mystery Book Club. They solve real-life murder mysteries in their community, and as they work on these cases, they begin to realize that there is a dark occult conspiracy connecting the cases, and they have to eventually face that sort of supernatural conspiracy in order to save Brindlewood Bay. It is a cross between, it is basically Murder, She Wrote meets cosmic horror or H.P. Lovecraft. That is my that's the one-line hook, I guess, for that game. And we're on Kickstarter until May 30th. So yeah, we're really excited.
Chihuahua Zero in the chat says, I saw Jason Cordova in my inbox and pressed watch now. Glad to have you with us. If y'all have any questions while you're watching, feel free, toss them in the chat. Would love to talk to you. If you want to toss them in now or later on, that's great. If you have any questions about Brindlewood or just things you'd love to ask Jason, toss them in. We would love to hear from you. And so, no, I've read the Brindlewood a number of times. But we got to play it a little while ago on channel also too, so you can go watch that. Had an absolutely great time. Got through 2 mysteries and had a really good time.
It was really fun. Yeah, it was fun.
Like I said, today I want to dive a little bit deeper into like some of the specific design ethos that you engage in. We were talking right before we went live. A lot of it's public. A lot of times people kind of get to see and hear things from you as the games evolve, which is a very distinctive part about the way that Gauntlet does things, as well as the way that you specifically do things. And so it's really nice to be able to say, like, oh, here's things I've heard you say or seen you do, and I want to pick those up a little bit more and you know, kind of chew on them a little bit. So I'm very excited to dive into that. But again, if people have not had a chance to go over to the Kickstarter yet and back, now is a great time to do that. So for people who aren't familiar with how Brindlewood Bay works, tell us a little bit more about kind of what sets it apart from other games, other than I don't know of another game that is Murder, She Wrote meets Lovecraft. Obviously, right, thematically we've got that, but there's a lot of distinctive elements. It's ostensibly kind of a PBTA game, but some of the moves that are incorporated really moves it into its own category. So you'll hear people say carved from Brindlewood or other things like that, recognizing that its root is really in this. But tell us what makes Brindlewood distinct in play.
Yeah, I think its big standout feature is probably the mystery system, right? As you mentioned, it is kind of powered by the Apocalypse chassis, but I actually think the mystery system can probably be bolted onto any game if you really like. I don't think it would be too much trouble to do it, because there's nothing fundamentally PBTA about the mystery system. Right. The mystery system, the way it works is, so the Murder Mavens, who are the characters that you play, these older women, they can, as a player, you can have your Murder Maven investigate in any way that you want to. You can go talk to this person over there or that person over there. They can do archival research. They can go look at the body. They can go poking around in someone's office. You can approach the investigation however you want, and no matter how you approach it, the keeper, which is what we call the GM, can respond and give you a clue, because they are operating off of a list of clues that they sort of adapt to the scene, or they adapt to the moment. And so there's no wrong way to do the investigation. That's kind of one part of it. The other big part of it is once you've gathered enough clues as a play group, you then have a discussion about who you think did the murder. And the thing about the mysteries in Brindlewood Bay is they do not have canonical solutions. This is the big marquee feature, right? Not even the keeper knows who did it, right? We don't know who did it until the players talk about it and come up with a theory and then roll some dice to see if they're right. And based off the die roll, they might be right, or they might be right, but there's a big complication with the answer, or they might be totally off base and the person they thought did it ends up dead themselves, right? So it's a mystery system that is very collaborative. You're essentially kind of building the mystery after the fact, right? But what I think is so great about it in play is it really takes advantage of the medium of tabletop role-playing games to do a mystery, right? I think a lot of mystery role-playing games, in my experience, they tend to want to deliver the mystery in the way other mediums do it, like a film or a book, right? But role-playing games, they don't have the same advantages that those mediums have. You know, like in a role-playing game, you don't have like actors and things, right? Or special effects. And in a film or in a book, you don't have, or you don't have like in a book, like a forced perspective that like gives you the clues in a certain order, right? And so sometimes it feels a little off, in my opinion, because it's not taking advantage of what makes a tabletop role-playing game fun. And to me, that is collaborative storytelling. And so leaning into the aspect of collaborative storytelling is what my mystery system does, and I think that's why people have responded to it so well.
Yeah, and I asked Jason this ahead of time. So, Jason, if you want to maybe pull up one of the list of clues, I'll give people a little bit of a taste just between the two of us of what that looks like in a moment. If y'all have questions, feel free to toss them up. I love this, and I love this because my background, I was. For the longest time, the primary system I played in was GURPS. GURPS, of course, has a mystery supplement. It has more than one mystery supplement. But it was always funny because it's a lot of narrative technique. It's like you want 7 points and because people can't really handle more than that. But this many should be red herrings and da-da-da. And it was always like, this seems like a nightmare to GM. And I've seen people try to do every type of murder thing in any type of system. And I will say, like right now, I think your statement of you can pull this out and drop it in any game is 100% true. It is.
I think it would work.
Yeah. So we just did the Together We Jam thing for our house system, Together We Go, which is ostensibly a kind of a new school like OSR type system. That's very focused on dungeon crawling, but somebody made a game called Unhaunt This House because I was like, I would love to do a private eye game. It's just a very simple like Together We Go system with Theorize that plopped on the end as how you solve the crime. But they made a ghost game that's called Unhaunt This House that is it's our like Down We Go. It's it's got its own haunting like rolls and stuff like that. But it's got Theorize just on the back end of it. And,
nice.
We're playtesting it later on this month, so we're gonna be doing it on stream. But like it was really easy to pull out and put on a very different system. But
it has like the whole list of clues and everything. It's got all that. Like
so like they did the one page like play testable version of the game. So we're gonna be running the first haunt later on this month and seeing how it all works out. So but each one of it, instead of having all these other things, it'll have a list of clues and other stuff like that you'll go through. And then there's a little bit more of a final showdown with how do we resolve this haunting that looks a little bit more probably a little bit more active than we call the cops.
It's probably more like the between too, right? Like
right. It's a little bit more like the between where there's going to be an active.
There's an action component, right?
Yeah.
That's not really in Brindlewood Bay.
Let's if you've pulled it up, let's pull out a couple clues and just kind of talk through what Theorize might look like.
So so I've got the mystery called Jingle Bell Shock, and Jingle Bell Shock is that's one of the ones that comes in the core book. And it is essentially my mystery that's inspired by Knives Out. When I wrote this, I was very, very into Knives Out. And so, but what it is there is a senior member of this wealthy family, the Hawthorns, Amelia Hawthorne, and all of her family have gathered for their annual Christmas gathering / kiss the ring ceremony of Aunt Amelia, right? But then Aunt Amelia ends up dead. And so the murder mavens, the beginning of the mystery, the murder mavens, they're participating in the Brendawood Bay Lunch Club's annual Ugly Christmas Sweater Carol-a-thon fundraiser. And the players have to describe their Mavens' ugly Christmas sweater, of course. And when they go to the house of the Hawthorns to do their caroling, they discover that Amelia Hawthorne was found murdered moments before, right? And so as they begin searching the house, going through, the various like rooms and stuff of the Hawthorne home and talking to the various suspects, some of the clues they could get are a bundle of racy Christmas cards. Okay. And if you were actually playing the game, I might, as the keeper, massage that clue a little bit to say a bundle of racy Christmas cards featuring Carolyn Hawthorne, who's Amelia's niece, right? Like I might add that little detail just to give it some punch or to make it connect up in a certain way. A secret crawl space somewhere in the house, say a crawl space leading into Amelia's bedroom, which is where she was found dead. A suicide note from years ago preserved as a keepsake. And maybe we could say that the suicide note was from the Hawthorne, sort of like an elder family member, right? Like a father figure or something. And then we have a parody version of the 12 Days of Christmas, the lyrics of which are a scathing indictment of the Hawthorne family. So you would just dole these clues out as the Mavens are going around, and it's kind of hard to like piece together a theory, like context. But in the context of like talking to characters and learning about their motives, because a lot of the characters do have kind of built-in motives, and kind of in searching the environment and stuff, the players start to have a sense of like how these things might connect up and what they might mean, and indeed they come up with a theory of the case, right? So that's kind of how it works. Yeah.
So and I love the process, because the first time, like I said, the first time I ever had a chance to roll through it, it did not go well. The GM had never run a card from Brendawood game before. It was not either the Between or Brendawood Bay. Most of the players had never played it and were not familiar. We had somebody who had a very strong idea about what they thought should be happening, to the exclusion of other people. And I'd heard stories from some of my other friends like, oh, I disagreed with your final conclusion on what we rolled for. But when you ran it through, it's a moment where all of a sudden, like, the role between keeper and player kind of fades away, and you all sit down and you kind of step out of the narrative, and you just have a conversation as a group of players around what makes the most sense, and you challenge back and forth on each other about why this might make sense, why this might make sense. There's a lot of push and pull that happens in that space, but at the end, both times we played it, everybody was, I think, very satisfied with the end result that we rolled for, both of which or all three of which I guess were successful. And so it's not just, hey, you pull clues and then the first one with the theory rolls the dice with their explanation and gets it out there. But
no, you talk about it.
You talk through it. And
the rule says when you come to a consensus, right, you do have to all agree, right? Like that's kind of a critical part of it.
Give me just 1 second.
For sure. Yeah.
So the and by the way, thank you everybody for a ton of subs that just happened on stream. We really appreciate it here.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for supporting the channel. There was a whole lot of them that just came through, so thanks, folks.
Awesome.
No, it's such a great piece of tech, and I love it because of one of the things that you noted, like it lets the GM be surprised. Also, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to come up with a mystery, I don't know how to write a mystery, I don't know how to lead people through the beats, I don't know how to do all these different pieces. And Theorize takes all that off the table and says, well, you just tell people the bad thing that happened and then let them explore it and give them clues, and then you all figure it out together. That type of team brewing is something that I'm a huge fan of, and love seeing around the table. And again, I love moments where the GM gets to be a player, or it's acknowledged that the GM is a player, because they're a different type of player. But I think we missed that a whole lot in RPGs, and
I agree.
I think PBTA does that well. I think Brendawood does it tremendously well. I think there are a lot of games that have started to acknowledge that. But the other big thing is, it doesn't require prep. So it doesn't require, because I listened to actually an episode earlier where you were talking about this. It doesn't require you to sit down and write out the mystery, though you can.
Right, yeah.
Tell people who aren't familiar. You mentioned there's a list of it, and you mentioned kind of the setup, but there are these great mysteries that come included in the game. Tell us a little bit about how those are presented, and kind of some of the choices that went into the. It's really not minimalist, but very direct and simple format of how a mystery is presented in Brindlewood.
Yeah. So the way the mysteries are presented in Brendawood Bay is they are essentially 2 or 3 printout pages, or in the book, they take up about 6 or 7 pages in the book, but it's a pretty slim amount of information. And I think the best way to understand it is that they are highly focused highly focused on certain types of details and themes and ideas. And it is everything that the keeper needs to improvise in the moment. It is not a to Z story, right? Like you might find in a more traditional module. It's not, this is the beginning of the story, and then this happens, and this happens, and this is how it concludes, right? It is a list of characters, some descriptive notes about those characters, just 3. A quote so that you can role play the character or be inspired of how to talk like the character. It has a list of locations with a question that you pose to the play group to help flesh out the scene. Because again, it's a collaborative process. It has the list of clues. Every mystery has a opening little part that's how you present the mystery. So basically how do you present the mystery to the players? What is the scene that you have in order to make that happen? Which of the suspects have to get introduced right in the beginning? All that kind of stuff. And the focus is not so much on telling you everything, every possible thing that could happen in the scenario. It's giving you plenty of things to go back to as the keeper when you're sort of improvising the play, right? You always have this sheet that you can return to be okay, well, I need a character right now. Let's go with this character. Or they're in this place. Who might show up here? Oh, probably this character. And so that's more what it is. And that really goes back to how I personally run and prep games. I like to just even when I'm running a module, I like to pull out just the big, key, important details and focus on those things because it's easier to manage that cognitive load wise, right? But yeah, it's in play. It's a very well, you also want to have that kind of negative space of a fairly light scenario because it's somewhat collaborative. The players are going to be filling in details too that the writer of the mystery couldn't have anticipated, right? And so you need space to do all that. And so they are scenarios, but they are not linear stories. They are a toy box of things to play with as the characters are roaming around the environment, right? That's really what it is. They're organized around a big idea or a theme. And I think that's the most natural way to run a game in the moment, right? And now that said, it's helpful to read the scenario beforehand. You should probably read it, right?
This it's really funny. When people will say how much time do you spend prepping for a session? I'm how much time do I sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil in front of my hand getting ready for a session? 15 minutes, whether I'm a player or a GM, 15 to 20 minutes at least, because I want to be ready for the session regardless of what my role happens to be in that. How much time I spend during the week thinking about the session I'm going to run this weekend. I'm the kind of person who's I'm going to sketch out a couple of ideas. I may write them down, I may not, but I'm going to think about them a lot in the back of my head for a week, and then I'm going to show up. And so I love random tables for the inspiration, but I want to roll a couple of hours before I'm going to play on most things and then do that. Or I want to read all the prompts or the PCs for this game an hour before I go. So I have them in my head. I've taken them in. They've all digested. They've got, mixed together like the batter of a very good bake. And then I want to come to the table and see what we all do together with that.
Well, and I think a good module or a good scenario, and I like to think this is how we do it in Brindlewood Bay too, is the creator of the scenario is not telling you every possibility. What they're doing is they're teaching the setting to you, right? Like they're teaching you about the setting. They're teaching you about the tone and the types of characters you might find and the types of environments that the characters might end up in. Nothing on the Brendawood Bay mystery sheets is exhaustive, right? You can have characters that are not anticipated by the mystery show up, right? You can have places that are not anticipated by the mystery, but by having that list of things, it inspires you, right? Even if you're not even actively thinking about it as the keeper, you're at least in a certain type of headspace. And hopefully that's what the mystery's done. It's like sort of taught you about this environment, this setting, this mystery, like kind of what it is about. And that's how I like to prep. That's the value of reading any module to me. Even very detailed ones, I know I'm probably not going to like look at it super closely while I play, but at least by having read it, I have sort of immersed myself in it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing too. It's kind of like teaching you the setting a little bit, right? Because all the mysteries in the game collectively are the setting of Brindlewood Bay, right?
Yeah.
And so that's
And
that's my philosophy.
we've kind of touched on the cozy side of Brendawood Bay. There are there are bakeoffs. There are quaint little coffee shops in the seaside town. There's all that. There's also a dark mystery afoot that is happening behind the scenes. So I did, by the way, while we were talking, I popped up data overboard on the stream, so on the screen, so people could kind of see in general the length of just one sheet, what one of those mysteries looks like. And it's like you can see, it's very easy to be able to pull those details together. But there's two types of clues that are listed on there, right? There's
there's regular clues and void
the normal clues,
yep.
But there's the void clues because there's something more sinister afoot in Brendawood Bay. And this is the part I haven't had the chance to really experience it, having never played a full campaign of it. I've obviously gotten to touch on a lot of beats of it as we played, but tell us a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes in Brendawood Bay.
Well, this is actually one of the most exciting parts of the Kickstarter campaign, because in the original version of Brendawood Bay, which we now call the preview edition, although until a few weeks ago I just called it Brendawood Bay, but what we're now calling the preview version, which by the way is available for free on the Kickstarter page, you can go download it. It was an intentionally kind of like small space, right? It was just 40 pages. We thought it was originally going to be a zine quest thing, so we made it zine size, and because of that, there was a lot of things that we could not put in it, right? That we just left to the keeper's imagination. And one of the things that's so exciting about the Kickstarter campaign is it's giving us the space and the resources to really, really make Brendawood Bay kind of how it's always existed in my head, right? In terms of like what I want it to be, And the occult conspiracy part of it is a big thing. Actually, what we just talked about, like keeper support and all that stuff, that's another thing that's greatly expanded in the Kickstarter.
Oh, we're gonna don't worry, we're gonna get to that.
But the conspiracy stuff, the occult conspiracy, so that's a part that the Kickstarter is letting us. We're really, really getting to flesh that out, and it's awesome. So the basic idea of it is back in the 1800s, or some year a long time ago, when Brendawood Bay was a whaling town, this ship called the Deep Reaver hauled in a whale, and we're going to put whale in quotes because it had tentacles and lots of eyes and it was very strange looking. But they cut it up and shipped its parts all over the world. And the money that they earned from that is how Brendawood Bay became what it is today. They used that money to build up the town, right? And so Brendawood Bay, just at a lore level, has this idea of, we found a chthonic monstrosity in the ocean and we cut it up into pieces, and now here we are, right? And but as you sort of like get deeper into the lore of the town, the town has this, like, throughout its history has had these like moments that indicate that there is something geographically and cosmically significant about Brendawood Bay, right? Various cults have shown up over the, in the past, various like strange events have happened and that kind of thing. And this is all stuff you learn as you do the campaign, right? Our cult at the time of the game is called the Midwives of the Fragrant Void. And they're not just women, even though they're called midwives, it's men and women, but The Midwives of the Fragrant Void are a Greek mystery cult, or like a Greek death cult. And what they're trying to do is they are trying to bring forth what they call a child of Persephone. They worship this monstrous aspect of Queen Persephone, and they want to bring forth this chthonic child from the ocean. And that is a sort of your classic Lovecraftian monstrosity, right? That's the Cthulhu she wrote part, right? And so all these murders that are happening, the cult is either aware of them or it's a part of some sort of grand ritual the cult's engaged in, right? And so the Mavens are like, the Mavens are like fingering the right suspects and everything, and people are going to jail. But in the background, everyone's being kind of manipulated by the Midwives, right? In order to complete this ritual. And as the Mavens learn about it, they realize what's really going on, and they have to confront the Midwives in order to stop whatever this ritual is, to raise this child of Persephone, right? The Kickstarter book is going to have a lot more information about the magic and the powers and abilities of the Midwives, their connections in the town. There's a monster manual. The monster manual is a selection of monsters inspired by Greek myth, but made Lovecraftian, so like horrifying cosmic horror versions of like minotaurs and Medusas and things like that. And then it'll also have a section about these children of Persephone, these titanic monstrous entities, and how you basically, the way it works in the Kickstarter version as opposed to the old version is, before you begin your campaign, you pick the child of Persephone that you want the Midwives to be trying to summon, and then that has extra details about how to do the campaign, basically, right? Like how to like make that campaign structure even more precise and specific to that child of Persephone. In the old version, this was all just left to the keeper's imagination, and that worked fine. But we are very excited to kind of give these extra resources and ideas about the Midwives, because the Midwives, it truly is a two-part game, right? It's cozy murder mysteries, but it's also this other thing. Yeah. And so we're getting to really expand that part of it a lot.
It's really great. ZW Garth just wrote, "That's awesome. Reminds me a bit of the Between's mastermind."
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like we've learned a lot about the Between, right? Or right. Like Brendawood Bay informed the Between, and the Between informs Brendawood Bay. I will say that we're actually we're reworking every single official mystery so that they're a little bit more like a Between threat. They have moments and they're structured slightly differently. It's still fundamentally the same thing, but yeah, we're definitely taking the learning of the Between and like kind of adapting that to Brendawood Bay a little bit. It's not quite as the Between still like Brendawood Bay still assumes just one campaign arc, right? Like the characters are just good for one campaign arc, and maybe a couple of side mysteries or whatever. But yeah, we've definitely taken a lot of that like inspiration from the Between. Definitely, yeah, 100%.
And for people who aren't familiar, the Between is your other game, and it is its own grandpa, because the Between, you started first, created Brindlewood to create a mystery system, which we've talked about extensively for the Between, and then moved it back over. And so these two games are intrinsically connected.
They are hacks of each other.
Yeah, and so it's a really beautiful way to see design. Speaking of which, like you started touching on it, and it is one of my favorite things about watching. I would say generally things that come out of Gauntlet Pub, but I think it's tremendously informed by the way that you do things, as well as a number of other people within the community, and that is the public nature of the way the games are designed and formed and played, because play is such a central part of the community and the design process. So it's really funny to be like, you're like, Brent, I'm so excited my first game is getting produced, and I was like, that's such a buck wild thing to hear Jason Cordova be like, my first game is on Kickstarter now, and I'm like, we've been playing these games now for years, and very excitedly so. And it's one of my favorite things, because by the time you have arrived at Kickstarter, which is very successfully funded, but there's some really cool stuff coming up that we're going to talk about in a minute. So please, if you have not gone to fund it yet or back it yet, please do, or share it if you're unable.
Yeah, we are on like one of the two most exciting stretch goals right now. Like the second of the two is not announced yet, but
but that means you get to see people run it. You get to see people play. The way that you run it informs it. We've been having conversations all day long in our Discord today about Down We Go and the community of play that surrounds it and the culture of play that surrounds it, none of which is explicit in the game, which is a very old school thing and something we're deciding how much we want to lean into or not. But when people are playing games before a game is printed, you have the ability to see what emerges in that space and then codify it. So let's talk a little bit about that. Both the process, but also what are some of the things as you've seen people playing Brendawood and the Between to a certain degree, and hacking it and doing other pieces with it, that really has shifted the way that y'all have thought about it? Maybe not fundamentally, but on some level.
That's a great question. I think the really interesting thing about the way we do things in the Gauntlet is we do have that really strong culture of play, right? Play is so central to everything we do. And when I was creating Brindlewood Bay, and especially the Between, but Brindlewood Bay as well, there was this real effort on my part, a really like direct, intentional thing where I wanted to codify many of the techniques and play culture things and rules and stuff I developed just playing and running games. I kind of wanted to make it an official part of these games, right? But you're right. What's really interesting, because Brindlewood Bay has been in the world for 2 years plus, and the Between is now going on like 8 or 9 months at this point. We've had a chance to watch people play these games and get lots of feedback about them, and things reveal themselves that I didn't even anticipate, right? So one thing that was really, really intriguing about Brindlewood Bay and the Between that did not occur to me when I was creating the games, but I love now, is the way people use conditions. So in the game does not have hit points or anything like that, right? You can give a character a condition, and the condition can negatively affect their die rolls, but and theoretically informs the role play, but and does some other things mechanically, but it kind of works more or less like conditions do in other games. But what we were discovering is that people were using conditions as a way to seed future story ideas, as a way to encourage certain types of play. They were creating these really like interesting, ornate conditions that were so cool that the players didn't want to get rid of them.
As somebody who has collected a number of conditions from you when we have played,
I'm
always I'm very much like, if I don't have 2, there's no way I'm clearing any of these. If I don't have, but I also might just go ahead and keep them and wait for 3.
Well, that's the thing.
Is there one
that came from
go ahead.
And my way of doing it that way, that came from the play community, because I don't think I realized the power of the conditions when I was first creating them. Like I wanted to create a particular gameplay loop. Okay, you get a condition, so you have to have a cozy scene in order to get rid of it. That's a gameplay loop. Great. But having it out in the world, we got a chance to really see how people are using them to create these really cool moments at the table. And fortunately, a lot of that learning is going into the Kickstarter book. So that's a great advantage to having your game out there for a while.
Is there a condition that kind of jumps out to you as one of the ones that you first remember being like, oh, this is different than I thought?
Yeah. So once I started to kind of realize like what people were doing with conditions, I was just going to try it out myself. And I was running the Between, and there's this moment in the Between where it usually happens pretty early on, because it's one of the kind of starter threats, where the characters are at this opium den and they're talking to this character called the Man in the Sun Mask. And the Man in the Sun Mask is this very cryptic, almost like a David Lynch type character. He wears a sun mask. He speaks about other worlds. He's very cryptic and speaks in riddles. And players love the character. The character is very, very fun. And then after that conversation, you give the player a condition called Sons of Another World. And I don't know what it means. The player doesn't know what it means at first, but they want to know. And so they keep that condition, and suddenly it starts to inform their role play, and they begin using it as a touchstone for things happening in the game. I love stuff like that. I've started to do this thing where, as a way of seeding future story possibilities and future complications, I'll say that a character is, quote, marked by another character, right? You are marked by this character or that character or this killer or this monster or whatever. And that is my justification as the keeper to antagonize that player with that character because they've been marked by that character, right? So yeah, there are different things you can do. And that's been a really, really fun side effect of letting the games kind of like simmer out of the open for a while. You know?
Yeah, and there's no, though maybe with one of the most recent stretch goals announced, there's currently no GM screen in Brendawood Bay, by which I mean you normally, like, oftentimes you'll be like, I'm going to give you this condition. Who knows what it means? We'll find out later. Like, there's no desire to hide from the players. I don't know. Let's figure this out. Which I adore. Roll for Felicity just said, in my home game of Monster Hearts, one character has the condition bitch, and recently in Stars and Wishes, their wish was to never lose that condition. And I think it's true. I think some of the things that we get were like, I don't want to lose that until I know what that means. And if you're watching this and like wondering, okay, well, if there's no hit points, or like, how do these conditions work? Like, as the keeper, you can kill a character anytime there's a bad roll, pretty much, because of the way crowns work within the game also too, which lets basically you mark something off. It changes the way that character functions in the future. And then all of a sudden they can roll back time and try again, which is I love as a tremendous piece. Dice Ghost has the question, which I think is huge at this point, and touches into some of what we've been talking about. What considerations do you put into the design that keeps the background story arc going among those mysteries? So we've got the episode of the week, because it's very much a TV show format. We do the opening, scene as we go in. We see what's going to happen in the world of each of the Mavens, and everything is paced out in a very beautiful cinematographic way that guides you through that process. But there is this overarching scene spot happening. How do you track that mystery in the background effectively?
Yeah, so it'll work a little differently in the Kickstarter edition, but in the older edition, you had this sheet called the Dark Conspiracy Sheet. And the Dark Conspiracy Sheet essentially has like layers of the Dark Conspiracy. So layer 1, layer 2, until you get to the final part. And the characters will find these clues called void clues. Now, void clues, they're called clues, but they're not really related to any particular mystery. They're more of a timer. So as the characters are finding void clues, once they hit certain numbers, a different layer of the Dark Conspiracy unlocks. And each layer of the Dark Conspiracy basically gives the keeper guidance for the kinds of things they can talk about, the kinds of things they should be doing at that time. So in the initial layers, it's just about the history of Brindlewood Bay. So once they've found a certain number of void clues, I think it's 3 or something like that, they unlock the layer that lets them talk about the history of the town. And so the keeper should be trying to find moments to like bring that history of the town into it. We don't talk about the cult yet. We don't talk about supernatural entities yet. We just stay with the history of the town, because that informs what's coming later. And then the next layer, I think the next layer is when the Mavens first hear the words Midwives of the Fragrant Void. They don't meet any characters. They just hear the existence of this group. And then as it keeps going, it gets a little deeper. The Midwives eventually start to become very directly antagonistic. And ultimately, you unlock the layer that lets you do the final mystery against the Midwives. In the middle of all that, the keeper, in between sessions, there's space on the conspiracy sheet to make notes about what you think is, like different characters you want to see return in the final mystery, like your own personal theories about what the Midwives are up to. And you kind of keep track of it as you go. It will work slightly differently in the Kickstarter edition because of this Children of Persephone thing that I was talking about earlier. But it's kind of fundamentally the same thing, though. Like, there are layers of the conspiracy that unlock, and that's how the keeper tracks it. Like, essentially, you're essentially like, I'm essentially like sharing my headspace with the keeper. It's like, this is the order I think things should go in, and this is for narrative pacing purposes, this is when you should be talking about this or that, right? And I should mention that this is the kind of structure that you could put this in any role-playing game, right? Like, you could absolutely do that,
And that's the thing. It came up, like I said, in the conversation we were having all day long on our Discord about the culture of play that grows up around games. Specifically, Paint the Scene came up as part of that conversation.
That's my great contribution to the hobby.
How that's different to or similar to Laura's Loot, which is one of the key pieces of narrative tech that we use. And down we go. And one of the things I love about the games you write is you and I have a lot of the same fascinations about the intersection between old school play and story games. And you very much write in a way that always excites me to see the intersection of those things. But Paint the Scene is just such a great piece of basic tech. Yeah, again, you could write down anywhere. For people who aren't familiar with this very simple piece, tell people a little bit about Paint the Scene.
Yeah, Paint the Scene is a thing I developed. Well, that's about 7 years ago now. That I was just using it at my tables. It was not for a game. It was just for the games I was running, basically. But what it is, so the characters arrive at a location, a house, a place, whatever, any kind of game. And as the GM, you pose a question to the group, a question that I call a Paint the Scene question. That in answering the question, the players are exploring an idea about the place. So it's not just, what do you see? That's not what Paint the Scene is. Paint the Scene is, what do you see that tells us X? That's Paint the Scene, right? So I love an example. My favorite example from when I was running Dungeon World and fantasy games more, a Medusa's villa, right? Paint the scene. They arrive at the villa. What do you see that tells you a Medusa lives in this villa, right?
Right.
and so then the players start thinking like, oh, well, okay, maybe there's lots of statuary around, right? Because that's what Medusas do. They turn you to stone. Or all of the mirrors are covered with a heavy cloth. Or I look up and there's a fresco that's like snakes, it's like snake themed, decorations. And I love this technique because it accomplishes a few things. The one thing it does is, so you have this basic problem in role-playing games that other mediums don't have, which is everyone has their own headcanon, right? Everyone has their own idea about what a thing looks like and what a thing is. And uniting everyone's headcanons enough to make the story go is kind of one of your main jobs as a GM, right? And so what Paint the Scene does is you pose the question and everyone begins thinking of their idea of what it means, right? They're starting to get their head spinning, but then they have to speak, right? They have to speak about what their idea is, and what they speak is true. And so by everyone speaking, everyone's thinking about a concept or a theme, and then everyone speaks about their idea, and suddenly we have this fleshed out shared space, right? It short circuits a big problem in role-playing games, right? And I love that about it. But that's what Paint the Scene is. That's the idea. You can also do things that are a little bit more mundane, like you arrive in a dusty Dust Bowl town. What do you see that tells you that this town has seen better days?
Yeah.
Right? Or in Dad Overboard, what do you see on this yacht that tells you this family has more money than they know what to do with? Right? Like that's what Paint the Scene is. Right?
Yeah, and I think like it's for me, like one of the things at one point I was playing a game and I was told and I was playing it with like BJ Resio and ZXU and a few other people on stream, and I was like, I'm really working on my telegraphing. Like, I'd love any feedback you have afterwards. And it was really funny because we got to the how is the game, and Seneca immediately was like, oh, you telegraphed really badly at this point. And he was like, oh wait, I didn't mean to say that's like my only thought takeaway from the game. I just know you asked this beforehand. Yeah. But like at one point I realized, like in games where you're not worried about what players know, I could have just asked that player, how do you know that a giant leech is wriggling around your feet right now? Like I was trying to subtly telegraph, and it was kind of at odds with the dark, still nature of the scene. I could have just asked them, you tell me how your character.
Well, and what I love about that example you just gave, that example is great because it establishes a thing is true. There is a slug thing at your feet, right? It then invites the player, indeed demands that the player think about what that means, right? Like, and then they get to fill in the horror, right? Like that's another part of it, right?
And
they get to inform it.
And I think like when we talk about like a lot of times GM technique or GM skills, when we open it up to the table, when we engage in team brewing and kind of these open play systems, what we're doing is it actually puts us in the position of also being able to learn, like so that when I want better symbolism or when I want to telegraph it or when I want to just drop something, the more I have asked you to tell me about things, the more I know how you as a player think, and the more I know when I just want to drop something, what's going to hit you. And that type of rapport at a table that develops over time and play is such a strong piece. And Paint the Scene teaches you that as a GM, even if you're not always going to use that thing. But I do love that you can also flex it, because if you wanted to be heavy-handed with the Medusa, you could say, how do you know there's a Medusa? You could also just look around and be like, what serpent motifs do you see around here?
Oh,
right?
yeah,
like, you know, like you don't have to immediately.
If you didn't want to
drop
say
it heavy
Medusa,
if
you could
want.
just say that part of
Right,
it. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and so, because you should never say the name of the monster, Jason.
True, fair enough. Yeah,
So,
that was back from a Dungeon World days, to be fair, but yeah, but yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
A couple insights from the chat about Paint the Scene. It's such a good way to generate ideas by giving loose creative boundaries. Making a discussion helps reduce the barrier to entry to make explicit, and by making it explicit to participate in world building. 100% agree. Yeah. The more TTRPGs I play, the more I love GMing in this kind of style. I think GMs are afraid that players will always make the challenges easier, but that's not been my experience. I'd say 100%. Like, people love to ramp it up. Yeah.
Well, one of the moves or one of the sets of moves in Brendawood Bay and the Between, the day move, the night move, the player sets the initial stakes. They set all the stakes in the day move, and they set the initial stakes in the night move, because they have to tell you what they think could go wrong. And dear viewers, I'm here to tell you that the players will always come up with horrible shit. Like, they every now and then you'll find a player who's clearly trying to soft pedal it, but they can't get away with that in the night move, because the night move, the keeper still gets to say, well, here's how it's worse.
Yeah, and I also love, like, a lot of times it's bad enough that you as the keeper playing with you, like, are like, yeah, that, and you'll die. Like, that's the worst thing. It's like that, the concept of loss of home and loss of place, that's tremendous and existential and horrible. Yeah. You'll also die if it
I like it when they start with, I'm afraid I'll die, and then you have to say how it's even worse than that, right? So that's fun.
This is a great observation by Signal Station also, too. When you're doing mystery solving, these types of leading questions means the players are not just world building, but exploring how their Mavens apply their expertise, which I love that observation. Yeah. That's really beautiful. No, it's there's a lot of really kind of tremendous things that happen in that space. The other thing I want to hit on, I'm trying to be really conscious of time, because I want to talk about two more things, is we'll talk about the other thing first, and then I'll remember what I was just about to say. The campaign's been going very successfully, and we're very happy with it. We've talked specifically about, like, both of our love of OSR and story game stuff. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stretch goals that you've recently unlocked, and the absolute amazing things that we can expect about ReaverCon, as well as this exciting stretch goal that we're going to get a live scoop on today.
Yes, you guys are getting a scoop today.
So tell us first about ReaverCon.
Okay, so we have unlocked tons of stretch goals, lots of new mysteries. One by Signal Station, incidentally, was a recent one. You could lead a horse to murder, which is pretty amazing. The current stretch goal, our 265K stretch goal that we're working on, is called ReaverCon. ReaverCon, now you might recall earlier in the conversation I talked about how it's actually called Deep ReaverCon. There's this ship called the Deep Reaver that found this whale and cut it up and sold its parts. That ship is now the center of a museum in town, and they have a tabletop gaming convention every year called Deep ReaverCon that they build around the ship and the museum, and the ship is actually used as a bar, incidentally, and it's a games convention. But what ReaverCon is in terms of our stretch goals is myself, Gus L, and Ben Lawrence.
Such a crew, too.
Great team, right? They're OSR types, and me. The three of us are going to we're going to make 3 interconnected mysteries that take place at Deep ReaverCon. Now, the ideas for these mysteries are actually still not settled, but we've come up with some ideas, but these are not 100% final yet. But we think one of the mysteries is going to be the world's best Sorcery of the Convalescence player is murdered, and the Mavens have to figure out who did it. Another, the one I think Gus is working on, is a cosplay contest where the ghostly crew of the Deep Reaver are involved in some way.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Yeah, and then we have the the live action dungeon crawl that is a little too real, a little too live action. So we have some heavy supernatural mysteries. We have a murder mystery. It's a good mix. We're really excited about it. The one thing about it I'll mention that makes it kind of OSR, I guess, is these 3 mysteries are going to have clues that are print and play handouts that you give to the players to puzzle over. So that's one way that these stand out from the other mysteries. And yeah, it's just a love letter to gaming, which is, important to me and to Ben and Gus as well. So
I love that. But also we have to ask the most important question, because everybody's asking, are we going to have Deep ReaverCon merch as
I actually cannot speak about that yet.
Which is the best answer.
I will tell you, but here's the scoop though. The scoop is we're not done taking your money. Backer Kit is going to have all kinds of stuff when we get ready to launch Backer Kit. There will be other things that were not in the Kickstarter campaign. You will not be able to get the cookbook. That is not going to be available on Backer Kit. You got to get that now. But we do have some plans for Brendawood Bay, maybe even ReaverCon merch at Backer Kit.
And Signal Station tossed it out, but I'll ask about the character. And I don't know if the name will land, but is there going to be a Robbie Wheeling move that the Mavens can take? To people who don't know, Robbie Wheeling is the Tom Hanks character from Mazes and Monsters.
Right.
And so
that was definitely in my mind when we were thinking about this idea, for sure. Right. So,
I'm so excited about that. I'm so excited to have you take more of my money also too.
Yes.
And so we've got that one, but you're also working on, there's another one coming up after that. There's probably more than that, just that one.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the next one. We got a little bit of a plus
is we've had a couple of big milestone stretch goals. We had one at 200K, which really expanded the lore of the Midwives. The 300K one is another one that I'm super personally invested in. I'm excited about. At 300K, we are going to, the Gauntlet's award-winning podcast team is going to put together a podcast called The Darkened Threshold. And The Darkened Threshold is a podcast that will cover Brindlewood Bay, The Between, and games inspired by those 2 games. So basically mystery games that come out of this particular lineage. We're going to cover those games on this new podcast if we unlock this stretch goal. The stretch goal, we're going to commit to 20 episodes of the show if we hit the stretch goal, plus there will be at least 3 actual play episodes where we go through the starter mystery for Brindlewood Bay. And so this is really important to us as the Gauntlet, because we have so much of what we do is podcasting, right? We're very, very into podcasts. We're into discussion podcasts. As you've mentioned a couple of times, discussing role-playing games is one of the things we do a lot and we're really good at. And we're really excited for the opportunity and the potential to sort of take this line of games that come from Brindlewood Bay and The Between and really create a discussion space for them, right? Mechanics, hacks, a space to highlight other people's unique mysteries or unique hacks of things. The Between creative community is out of this world. They are creating so much stuff. And so we're going to create this podcast space to sort of just keep the conversation going about these games and to get, and to really develop a whole little scene around them. Right. And as I will be one of the co-hosts of the podcast, and I'm really, really excited to bring that to people. And I feel pretty confident we'll eventually hit that stretch goal. So but nevertheless, it's a lot of money. 300K is a big goal. I hope we do have to kind of, work to get there. But I'm very excited about it because I think it really takes, I think it's just adding that extra bit of value to just the idea of Brindlewood Bay and The Between and these games, right? And just kind of celebrating the community around them.
I love it. Like I said, I'm such a fan of the narrative tech that you create and the way that you position moves. Diceco's just asked a question that's got a really great answer, and that's, will there be a jam? The answer is no. Well, maybe. But the other thing is there's a great contest happening.
We have a contest going right now. Yeah. We do contests. We don't do jams in the Gauntlet. That's partially because we don't have a presence on itch.io, but it's also just because we just, I don't know, we've always done contests going back years at this point, and we just like it as a format.
And contests for y'all are not weird speculative work scenarios.
No.
They are
It's
people submit things, they own those things. Y'all may make an offer to publish those things, but it really it creates an environment of support and everything that a jam does, but also says some people might get some money at the end.
Yeah, and there's a prize at the end. And I like the contest format mostly because I've said this before. I know from like in our Discord, like people for whatever reason in a contest, people just want to do really well. And so like they take it like super seriously. And I just like that. I like people like if I'm going to spend a bunch of time reading all these mysteries, I want everyone to have taken like the absolute like taking it super seriously so that it's like fun to read, and fun to do. But we always we like the contest format a lot because we have some money to do prizes, so why not? And it's not about the prizes. It's just about like it's about just like supporting each other in the community, because what ends up happening is people can take their stuff and go sell it if they wish, and wherever they wish, and that's perfectly fine by us. But also I think it kind of like encourages people to like to kind of like to go outside their comfort zone a little bit, and do something they might not otherwise do, and to take a chance on something creatively, and we've always gotten lots of good feedback that a lot of people like it was the push they needed to really try to get into like RPG writing in a really serious way. So we like it. It works for us. Yeah.
So Digustov asked, will there be a third-party license? You can make card from Brindlewood games, like it is.
Yeah, you don't need a license. The only thing we ask is if you're going to use our character names, we want you to ask us permission first for that. Like if you're going to use Sheriff Dalrymple or something like that. But if you're just going to like set a mystery in the town of Brendawood Bay, that's perfectly fine. There's no license. Having said all that, we know a lot of people want this because it's like a permission structure, I guess, to go ahead and create. And so we are going to be doing this summer. We're putting together an SRD and license for the Between, which will also cover Brendawood Bay. And so that will be available in the summer. Yeah.
No, and I'm a huge fan. Like it is interesting. Like people always think like, oh, well, I don't need permission to design in somebody else's system. You're right. As long as you're abiding by the law, you don't go nuts.
You can't copyright mechanics. So,
I do love the explicit reality of a design kit or an SRD and putting it out there and saying we want to encourage this. But I think Gauntlet has always been very clear about we encourage you to create stuff in our system and really want to support that both through contests, through grants, through a lot of other great work that y'all do. So if y'all are not familiar with all the great things both Gauntlet Publishing and Gauntlet RPG community do, you need to go get a little bit more engaged there. That's not a judgment on anybody. There's just a lot of tremendous stuff that comes out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people who would never ask permission. I think it's always great to make that permission explicit.
We did that for Trophy, right? Yeah. We had the Trophy SRD, and we put that SRD out for Trophy, and we saw a huge spike in people creating things for Trophy. So I think people just like to know that.
Which I just tweeted out, and I know Jason has an aligned goal. We're gonna do a big trophy feature over the summer on,
that'd be fun.
On Plus
the
One.
Books are done. That'd be great.
Yeah. So if you have an incursion that you love for trophy, I just tweeted out about it a little while ago. I think we're going to call it Hot Dark Trophy Summer or something like that. It won't just be Trophy Dark, but it'll be bold.
Hot Dark Trophy Summer is great. You need to definitely call it that. Really
and so, but I'm going to be looking to play a lot of incursions. So if you have one you love from the core books or something else, please go put a respond to that tweet or just message me somewhere. If you're watching or whoever, because I would love to be doing a whole lot more. I've also just said like we're playing Hearts of Wulin with Lowell in 2 weeks because they reached out, and it was like this is our year of catching up on everything Gauntlet for the last 3 years. And so, if you have an incursion out there and you're watching, please let us know. So the last thing I want to talk about in just a second is kind of the way that you structure the pacing and the amount of moves available to players at any given time in the games you design, and where that comes from. But just stick that in your head. You gave me two very cool pieces of art. We're going to preview here on
stream. I gave you a third one too.
Third one. Hold on.
I love the third one especially.
Let me hop over on Discord again real quick.
Yeah, sorry, I'm blindsiding you with that.
No, I'm always excited. We're going to talk about some of these art pieces in some of
these are three things. Never before seen.
So these
plus
are
1 XP viewers are the first ones to see them. So.
Exclusive. Again, Zach, thanks for the sub. Thanks everybody who's hopped on today. Here is the first one, which is the campfire image. So tell me a little bit more about this image. And remind me again, who's the artist for all these?
This is Cecilia Ferri. Cecilia is an Italian artist who does children's books illustrations. and has recently been getting into role-playing game work. We've worked with her for a long time on different projects, and this is the biggest one by far, though. So yeah,
awesome. So we've got this campfire kind of on a bluff.
Are we looking at that one now? Okay, good. Yeah,
tell us a little bit about it.
This is for a mystery called Homecoming at Bonfire Cliff. And this mystery is really interesting because it is one of the, it's the only mystery, official mystery at least, it's the only mystery that has like a slasher horror vibe. It involves teenagers and young people and like the history of a high school, and so like people who graduated from that high school years ago, like different generations of people. And it's still a murder mystery, but it has like a distinct like kind of slasher horror vibe, which is kind of fun. It makes it stand out from the other mysteries. If you want something a little darker and a little less campy, this is a great one. But I love this illustration. It just her style just has this beautiful softness that I think is just so good. Just really terrific. It's the color palette really kind of draws me into it for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. We've got this other one that is, I think, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, they all are. Of this pie.
Pies. Yeah. So this is for the Great Brendawood Bay Bake Off, which we played on this stream a couple weeks ago. And I believe we did play this one, right?
Yep. It was the second one we played. We got the
right,
most properly. We had a husband memorial cake with a real cigar on it. We had a tuna fish shrimp Swedish.
Oh, that horrible Swedish
savory
cake. Right. Yeah,
and we had a cake with a sculpture from my child on it.
Yes.
That I think hit the tones of Brendawood very strongly.
These pies are these are pies, and I clearly this is Cecilia having some fun because that cherry pie is supposed to look like a murder, right? Like it's clearly supposed to look like a crime scene. So I love that one. It's a pretty good one. This third one though is really beautiful.
All right, this third one. There's a lot going on in this one.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit about it.
So I think this is a beautiful piece. This is for Deadly Silent Auction. This is a great mystery because this is one of the mysteries that really dives into the history of the town. Like if you want to explore the history of the town of Brendawood Bay, Deadly Silent Auction is great, and it does it by way of these objects that are in this antique shop auction. And so the auctioneer ends up being murdered, so it's a murder mystery. But all these various objects and things that the Mavens interact with, including that moth in the very middle, they have like connections to the town historically, and that moth in particular has an interesting supernatural connection to the Deep Reaver whaling ship. And so yeah, this is a great mystery for kind of getting in deep into the lore of the town. And I just think this is a beautiful piece. This is just like so pretty.
So the playtest version, it's very art-like, right? It's very, I mean, beautiful layout. The art pieces that are in there are great. Trophy, y'all commissioned a ton of gorgeous art for.
It's all Jesse, but yeah,
right. But we're also seeing in this game that now you're adding a lot of art into it.
So much art. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that decision, because that's, I mean, from a publishing standpoint as well as from a design standpoint, when a lot of it is like has been left in this abstract space, to start to give form to it is a very interesting question. So there's obviously presumptively for you a value add in doing that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is really the power of crowdfunding, right? I mean, the way I look at it is these Kickstarter versions of the books are the ultimate version of Brendawood Bay, right? Like this is the final form of the game, right? Both mechanically, visually, packaging wise, and so I want it to be absolutely loaded with art. We actually unlocked a stretch goal early on in the campaign that basically doubles the amount of art, and Cecilia's been working hard at that. It's going to have so much art in it. I think between the two books, it's probably like, I don't know the exact number, but gosh, it's probably like close to 50 or 60 pieces of artwork, right? And for 300 total pages of books, roughly, maybe a little longer with the stretch goals now, but that's a lot of artwork, and so we just want it to be very, very just beautiful and colorful, and importantly, we want it to look different from what's out there, right? We just did not want this. We did not want these books to look like every other RPG book. In the same way that the game is not like every other RPG game, we didn't want the books to look that way either.
Yeah.
We wanted them to have their own distinct style, and I think Cecilia's really nailed it.
It's all absolutely gorgeous. Everything I've seen come out so far has been so good. I love the suggestive small elements in like each of these that hint a little bit of that menace, or the vastness of the world around them, kind of the sense of unknown. In each of them, which is just, I think, just such a tremendous way to explore this, and I'm very excited to see it come in alongside the system. Last thing I want to talk about, if you've got a couple more minutes, and if we need to, is one of my favorite things about your design, and I commented this when we played the Between. I think I may have brought it up in our kind of discussion afterwards for Brendawood, but I don't know if I did, is you do such a great job of, there are tons of moves to choose from, but every Maven just starts off by choosing one. Yeah. And at any given point during play, there's only about 3, maybe 4 moves that you can do initially. Later on in the game, as things progress, there's more moves that may come up. Talk to me a little bit about that choice, and how and where that kind of became a focus for you, both in the Between and in Brendawood.
Yeah. Well, so the thing about it is Powered by the Apocalypse games in general, I believe they have too many moves.
I agree. Like,
that's why I love too many moves. Yeah. Like, I can go through pretty much every PBTA game and axe about 30% of the moves. And that is fine, because it doesn't really, because the nature of PBTA is not that big a deal if it's got too many moves. But I do think that they don't need as many. And so when I'm thinking about Brindlewood Bay and the Between, but in Brindlewood Bay, the when we talk about the genre emulation of Brindlewood Bay, in this case, mystery genre emulation, the main thing I need the players to get to is the collecting of clues and the theorizing, right? That's the main thing they need to be doing. And so so it just needs enough moves to get you to that point, right? I don't think it needs much more than that. It has like a really particular core gameplay, and so the existing moves, which is, you're right, it's just a handful. They get you to the core clue gathering and solving of the mystery, right? And so that's basically it. It's just a matter of that's all it needs.
Yeah. Now, so go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, between the two games though, so in Brindlewood Bay, there's only one character sheet. There are not playbooks, right? Yeah. And whereas in the Between, there are playbooks with their own moves and different things. And that design decision, which is a related idea, is that in Brindlewood Bay, the characters are, what makes the characters interesting is what makes them similar, right? They are kind of united by what makes them the same. They're older women. They are widowed. They've retired to Brindlewood Bay. They love mystery books. And so you have just a few options and the single Maven move that helps distinguish them, but they are otherwise united by what makes them the same. Whereas in the Between, playbooks are helpful because the characters are very different from each other, right? They're so different from each other that they don't even like talk about their pasts, right? Like because it's their special thing, you know? So it's just kind of like the amount of moves that's needed to tell the story, basically.
But like your move structure also for both of these games also functions as a pacing and tonal shift piece. So like you've got in Brindlewood Bay, you've got metal, which you can pretty much do at any time, which is the core move that you're doing, which is like, hey, which I love because it is like you're looking for clues. Like that's what you're doing.
Yeah, about half the rolls is probably the metal move.
And it's really funny because like in Apocalypse Keys, I've watched people like spam the moves that give you keys, which are also kind of essentially clues, and ignore the rest of the loop. In Brendawood, it actually kind of leans into that a little bit more, where half of the time you do actually just want to be meddling in some way,
half the time you're doing the investigation. Yeah. Now the fact that you can use any of the abilities to do it gives it the variety, but it's just the one core move.
But then you get the day move and the night move. Talk a little bit about the day move and the night move.
Yeah. So the day move and the night move it's a genre thing, where basically I believe that nighttime in this genre of story, nighttime is more dangerous than daytime, right? And so they basically function the same, which is you roll it anytime the Maven does something risky, or, and this is the thing a lot of new keepers forget, or when they face something they fear. So when they find a void clue, or when the lights suddenly go out, or when they are just walking down a dark corridor, you're supposed to roll the day or night move at that point. And basically we set stakes and we try to determine like what could go wrong here, you know. And if it's the night move, it's more dangerous because the keeper gets to say it's worse than that, right? And but it's basically just it's ultimately kind of the basic task resolution, kind of combined with a sort of like keeping your composure type thing, right? And the results of that move usually take the story into different directions, which is what's fun about it. But yeah, they come from this idea of the night should be more dangerous than the day, right? And so the night move, they work basically the same, but the night move is in its text makes for more dangerous outcomes. So,
I love it. We also have the cozy move, which is like having used this both in the equivalent in the between as well as the cozy move. So I think makes for some of the best moments of
the best scenes come out of these. Yeah. In the between, especially in my experience in the between, the vulnerable move, which is the equivalent move, the absolute best role play comes out of that move, right? Like it's just two characters sitting in a room being vulnerable, right? It's in the between, it's the only time they're allowed to talk about their past, right? It's the only time they're allowed to like, you know, to really get vulnerable with each other. And those are really, really good scenes. It works the same way in Brendawood Bay too, because it's about coziness and intimacy, right? It's slightly different tonally, but it's the same idea. It's we get to like see these women as you know, exploring one of the major themes of the game, which is like they are each other's, like in this part of their life, they are each other's friends and companions, right? Like they are their support system.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I love that, like, you know, on the main sheet, like I know when I'm looking at a certain move, right? I know what, like, based on where we are narratively, I know, can I use this move right now or can I not? Which, from a player standpoint, takes such a cognitive load, especially when you're coming into a system for the new time. Like, I know if we're in a daytime or a nighttime for the most part right now. I know if this might be an appropriate moment for the cozy move, given kind of where we're at. You know, like the Gold Crown Mystery move, we can only use once per session, so it's either been used or it's not been used, right? And so we kind of know that. But I want to talk just briefly touch on as we kind of close out the rest of the moves, because everybody they can pick a Maven move at the beginning, and these are all named after kind of classic TV detectives, and it's really great because it kind of, in contrast to all the Mavens are all women, all the moves, are all male detectives, which I love, because we then see kind of the culturally it plays on a sense of the type of TV tropes that made, I think, Murder, She Wrote so singular was it was this very different person, but all the things surrounding that were all these men, and they were viewed as macho and confident, but we see this woman, this elderly woman, come in and be in that same space. So I love narratively what you're pulling in here.
I get that question all the time, like, why are they all men? And it's my sense of humor, like I just like the idea of these male characters being like the props in the game.
I absolutely love it.
Also, I'll add here too.
Go ahead.
We unlocked a stretch goal where there's going to be a whole new sheet of Maven moves inspired by classic literary sleuths. So Miss Marple, Poirot, Encyclopedia Brown, Nancy Drew. It's a whole new set of moves. So some
women also.
The TV detective ones are all men still, but we have this brand new Maven move set that we unlocked. So
like I said, and they're also good. I love the flavor of each of them. They're so creative. They pull out so much great stuff and shows I grew up watching on Saturday morning or Friday night also too. So I'm just super in love with it. Like I said, the last thing I wanted to touch on was the occult move, because we get to touch about this a little bit and play it. And what I actually want to ask is this, because it's something that comes up in some other games, but I, even as somebody who designs games and feels very comfortable like creating a move as part of a playbook or as part of an overall concept, the occult move is something that evolves narratively in play. And I've never been played in a game where a lot of custom moves come into play, like you might see in Masks and some other games. Talk a little bit about the occult move, but also like tell us a little bit about what people might want to consider as they're approaching creating an occult move, just as opposed to just a narrative.
That's a good question. Yeah. So the occult move, the way it works in the game is, now I should mention, it does not get used often, probably only, in my experience, like once or twice a whole campaign, to be honest. Like it comes up very rarely. But what it is the Mavens, if they have the justification for doing it, the Mavens can try to use supernatural power to accomplish a goal. And the first time they try to do it, you write a brand new move for the Mavens centered around that. And it frequently comes up in the context of like consulting tarot cards to learn the future, or learning how to exorcise a ghost or something like that, right? And it does ask a lot of the keeper in the play group, because it asks you to create a move, right? And that is something that there'll be a lot more like support text for that in the Kickstarter version of the books, which I'm very happy about. But essentially, it's an invitation to sort of think about what kind of story you want to have, what are the limits of what the Mavens can do, and it also gives you permission to sort of reincorporate aspects of the setting in a meaningful, mechanically hefty way, right? And so as the characters mark their Crown of the Void, or as they encounter supernatural things, the characters might reasonably want to say, well, what if we try to harness the power of the void, right? Like, well, you know, to fight back, you know, that's a question they might ask themselves, and this is a way to do it. Creating a move, the book will go over this in some detail, but essentially you just have to have some basic elements. A trigger, like what makes the move happen, and then you basically kind of slot it into different types of move bins, but essentially you just have the trigger and what happens on the various results. Now, it's the kind of thing that like I think has helped a lot when there is a good fictional justification for it. So I don't think it works as well if a player is just like, I want to try to do this, and there's nothing in the story that happened that makes any sense. But if the Mavens found a grimoire, you know, being used by the Midwives, or if they run into something like that, like that's a good justification.
If they find a piece of the whale,
yeah, precisely, or that moth, that framed moth in that last picture you showed, like if they have some reason to engage with the supernatural, that's when the occult move is really, really cool. It's super dangerous as written. It can push the Mavens to retirement really quickly if it gets out of hand. But that's kind of how it works. But the actual like writing of the move, you know, that's the kind of thing that the Kickstarter book is going to have. It's going to have that kind of like how to do it advice that the 40-page version just didn't have room for, you know. And I'm really excited about that. It's not hard. Writing a PBTA move is actually pretty easy. There's some basic formulas you can follow.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be exciting.
Could you give us an example from one of your sessions of play? You don't have to recall precisely.
Oh, sure, yeah.
A move that maybe evolved during the course of play.
So at one point in my current campaign that's on hiatus right now, the characters found this bloody willow crown, okay, like a willow crown covered in viscera and gore, and one of the Mavens was like, what happens if I put it on? and I didn't actually know. I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you think happens? And they were like, well, I think like if I put it on, I'll be able to like command this. They were dealing with this particular like hound of hell or something. I'll be able to like command that hound to do this or that. I was like, okay. So the trigger is when you put on the bloody crown of the King in Shadows. That's what it was called. Roll plus sensitivity, and on a 10+, you're able to command the minions of the King in Shadows. On a 7 to 9, you can command them, but there's a complication. On a 6-, the minions turn against you. Right, pretty basic. And that's how it developed. Right, it was basically the player saying, "What happens if I put this on?" It's like, well, I don't know. It sounds like you're wanting to engage with the occult a little bit, so let's do the occult move, right? That's kind of how it comes up in play. And one of the things we're doing for the mystery revisions, because I mentioned that we're revising them, one of the things we're adding something from the between. The between has rewards that you have at the end, and some of those rewards will kind of be the justification for using the occult move. So yeah,
I love that. I think the last time you were on, we went a little bit over also too. I'm always super delighted to talk to you. I can't wait till the next time we get.
Are people still in the chat listening?
We've had at least 12 people the entire time. We're at 16 right now. We've hit 20 a couple times. People have been very excited. Chad, if you have any final questions, feel free to toss them out. This is a great moment. Really appreciate everybody joining us. If you haven't yet, you need to go back the campaign. You can go to ttrpg.link/BrindlewoodKS. We'll take you right there. Also, if you just go search it on Kickstarter, Kickstarter, it'll probably show up.
Ship them up.
If you Google it on the internet, it'll be one of the first couple of responses.
It is
also
the very
too.
first one. In fact,
And so there's a ton of great things that are happening here. A lot of great bed and breakfast things happening in RPGs.
B&Bs are having a moment, aren't they?
This is a great question. Chihuahua Zero actually said, I'm still debating what tier to back. There is one part of this Kickstarter we have not talked about yet that is incredibly important. People can back at whatever level they feel comfortable with, but there is an item that is only going to be a physical item that you can only get during the Kickstarter campaign and will not be able to get any other time. Tell us a little bit about that item as well.
Yeah, so the Brendawood Bay Community Cookbook is the single add-on for this campaign. Although, as I've hinted, there might be some things on backer kit as well when you go to pre-order, but it is a cookbook. It's a usable cookbook. It's got about 100 recipes, and the recipes are all submitted by people in the setting. So it's an in-fiction cookbook, but it does work. And in the margins of each page are handwritten notes from a murder maven that are essentially collectively together make up a solo mystery game. So as you're reading through the notes, you're also piecing together a mystery of a murder that happened in the town. And so it is a cookbook / solo mystery game. It is made to look like kind of one of these kind of DIY church fundraiser cookbooks, right? It has like pages that look like they're photocopied and like clip art and things like that. And to give it more of like a found object feel, there is not going to be a digital version. And in fact, it is a Kickstarter exclusive. So if you get the Murder Mavens tier, which is the $90 tier, that gets you all 3 books: Brindlewood Bay, Nephews in Peril, which is the supplement book, and then the Community Cookbook. And the average, basically, you can do the math different ways, but essentially you are getting like the tier right before that at $65 for just Brindlewood Bay and Nephews in Peril. So you're essentially getting the cookbook for like another $25, which is $5 less than just adding it onto a pledge. You can just add it onto a pledge. Yeah. But basically those 3 tiers between Brindlewood Bay and Nephews in Peril and Murder Mavens, they get increasingly better value, and the Murder Mavens is the best value.
I don't care what tier you get, but make sure if you want that you get that.
If you want the cookbook, the cookbook, this is your Kickstarter is your only chance for the cookbook. That is, we'll have a few extra just for like contest prizes and stuff like that, but not anything that we're going to sell. So
yeah, no, I absolutely am thrilled by the way it's shaping up. I think it's such a tremendous game. I can't wait to see what other things we have a carved in Brendawood game that we've got on track for this summer. Which is just, hear
about it. Yeah.
I think I told you about it. It's called Not a Detective.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so, but it's going to be my hope is that the physical format is just that it's a newspaper broadsheet where the generals are on one side, the playbooks are on the back, and the middle is a murder board that you use when you're doing Theorize.
Oh, that's really cool.
And so that's our plan. Hopefully, it'll be actually out on Exalted this summer. I don't know if we'll put it. I don't think we're going to put it in our store. I think it'll be part of their summer sale. But I'm very excited about it. And so because again, like I said, I think, and it was really just like, I don't know what this game is. I just want to take Theorize and do something weird with it. And then a bunch of us we're talking about taking all the non-detective tropes that you see out there and just tossing them in. And
I love it.
There's so much of that also just in Brindlewood that is just tremendous. And so it's what if you throw all those weirdos into the same room and go from there. And so that's awesome. And then the GM will play whatever detective is actually the one that they liaison with at the whatever. And so I'm like I said, I think it's such a fun system to play around in. Everything I've played from the Unquiet Dark to what is it? What's the B&B one that Chris and Alicia did?
Oh, Bed Breakfast and Beyond. There's a new version of that coming that we unlocked as well. It's a fully 2-player version, as opposed to 2 players and a keeper. It's just 2 players, so that's awesome.
So if you're a designer and you love this space, please go check it out. If just to see about Theorize and the other pieces it did, like Jason said, it's pay what you want on Drive-Thru RPG right now, but it's also
free on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, so just go get it. If you want to support Gauntlet, go to Drive-Thru RPG. If you want to just check it out real quick to see if you want to back, go to the Kickstarter page and check it out. Jason, if people want to find out more about you specifically, follow the work that you do, what's the best place for them to follow you?
I recommend my Twitter is Jason Cordova 6, and you can also follow along on Gauntlet. The Gauntlet stuff is Gauntlet RPG on Twitter, and we have a website, gauntlet-rpg.com.
Awesome. I'd highly encourage people to go support the Patreon if they've got some extra ducats also too, to help support all the great work that Gauntlet does. But until next time, this has been Prestige Class with Jason Cordova, and class is dismissed.